Rosie was one that filled in the hedge. She was one instant and willing to step forward and to take her part, to play her part for God. She wanted a reward. Before she died, some weeks before she died, maybe a couple of months before she died, she sent me an offering. And knowing that we would be going back to India again and back to Jerusalem, where we work with Operation Tarshish to bring Jews back to the biblical homeland. We raised money for that purpose. And she sent me some money. She said she had an inkling that she wasn't going to live. And she said, I want you to take this, and I want you to bring some Jews back to the biblical homeland. She said, I want God to look favorably upon me. And I said, okay, Rosie, I'll do that. And she kept, every time I would talk to her, she said, when you going? When she was like a little kid. When you going? When you going? She wanted me to get that money over there and go, but I always do hand on hand with the people over there. And I told her, I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. And I didn't have the heart to tell her that I didn't want to run off, knowing that she could possibly die and I couldn't get back here. So now we can make our plans to do that in her honor, to glorify God. So I think another good example would be that our mother and our father, your mother, your father, they were something special, were they not? Your mother, if she was like mine, was a praying mother. I don't recall one day of my life, and I can think as hard as I'd like, I can't think of one day she missed praying every day, morning and night. I laid in bed every night and heard Mama praying for the family. She called every name out of her children and her husband and her mom and her dad, day after day after day. And unless one of the sisters could think of a day, I certainly can't. Mama believed in being equal with everybody. She was a woman that stood in the gap and filled in the hedge for her family. When Daddy had backslid for many years, Mama remained steady and strong with God, and she stayed in that gap and in that hedge for her family. Being an equal woman, she would take that little peppermint patty that Daddy would always bring home to her when he had some money, and he'd bring her home that little peppermint patty. That was Mama's favorite. And she'd open that and she would cut it in equal pieces for everybody in the family, because she loved all her kids the same. And she wanted to be equal with each one. That was Mama. Mama believed in standing in the gap and filling the hedge for her children. And we could go on and on with examples, but the greatest example that I can think of is my Savior, Jesus Christ, in Isaiah chapter 53. The one we appreciated more after he died than man did when he was living. You know, when Jesus walked the earth, he was ridiculed, he was mocked, he was persecuted. And then when he died, after he gave up the ghost, was buried in a barred tomb, went down into hell for you and me, he come out of the grave. And then after he ascended, went back up into heaven, then we begin to realize that our God, our Savior, was great in what he did for us. So it was after the fact that we realized that Jesus died for our sin, that he was the greatest hedge filler and gap filler that ever was, because he stood in our place. He sacrificed himself for you. He sacrificed himself for me. But on that day, as Jesus suffered in agony and died and stood in the gap, he was persecuted in such a manner that it became party time for the world.